I made my original painting of Annie, who is my daughter's 20-year-old cat, 1 year ago. And with that painting, I wanted that one to be more of a realistic type painting, and my goal was to capture her very loving, special spirit. She's a very compassionate cat. She stayed by my side day and night about 10 years ago when I was going through an illness, and she has done that many times for my daughter. All animals are special, and Annie is just a true gem. Now this year I would like to repaint her, but I would like to do it more in a kind of an abstract form. I had hoped to purchase some Venetian plaster, but I wasn't able to get it. I could order it online, but I didn't want to wait for that. And so I thought I would try something different. And I went to Home Depot and got a regular wall patch. And the wall patch is, I think it's going to work fine. It will put a texture on. It's meant to go onto a wall board. And I'm not going to be putting on too thick of a coat. If it was a large painting, I was going to put on something very thick. I maybe wouldn't want to use it because I don't want it to crack. I'm painting a gallery wrap canvas, which has some flexibility. And I think it'll be fine for this. I've talked to other artists who use regular wall plaster and they do fine. And in fact, some of them build it up quite a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and put that on. I'm starting with a canvas that I have already sketched Annie onto. And I created that sketch by taking two different photographs of her and kind of merging it into one. The photo that she had where she was sitting on this little log was, she had her eyes closed in that photo. So I took another photo that was the same size, but where she's kind of looking down and has this look on her face like she just is tolerating your presence and she is up to mischief or something. And that is a different side of her. She is a very compassionate, loving cat, but like all cats, she has her playful side too. And Annie loves to go on road trips. She's very adventuresome. She actually can go on a leash and go on walks, and she'll go camping, she'll go visiting people, she can stay at people's homes who have dogs. As long as the dogs don't bother her, she's fine. She has a very free spirit, and she loves people, and she loves adventures. So I will start by putting down a texture, and that will have to dry. I haven't read the directions yet. So I'll check the directions, I'll lay down the texture, and when it's ready, then I will start adding the acrylic paint. I have my wall patch material here. It says that it's flexible, which is really nice, and that it can be painted within 30 minutes. So we'll see how that goes. Sometimes I like using materials that I can get at Home Depot or Lowe's, because once you enter an art store, especially if it's an arts and crafts store, sometimes materials go down in quality and up in price. To stick to good quality, then you can end up paying quite a bit. So I want a textured surface, and when I buy something that is to cover a very large wall, like this can even be an exterior patching for outside of a house, you can get a large quantity of it for a much better price than a small jar of fine art material. So we'll see how this works out. So I want to add some texture and things without taking away my lines that I had. Of course, if this was for a wall in a house, you would be smoothing this out perfectly. And you wouldn't be putting down so much, you would just be putting enough to fill a crack. But I kind of like this effect. As my videos go on, I'm going to start doing a lot more with textures and palette knife work, and some also still painting, of course. I love painting. I won't ever leave that, but I like to try a few different things. It's kind of fun. Gives a little different effect here. And then if you follow me along, you can kind of learn along with me what works and what doesn't work. And anything that doesn't work, of course, I won't be continuing with. A little funny thing in the ears there. And I also would like to have some texture in the fur. Little whiskers coming off of there. Okay, and then I'm going to just lay some down up here, but I'm going to come back and texture over this with another little fun toy that I bought. Like I say in all of my videos, don't be afraid to try new things. That's how you find what you really love to do. If you try something new and you don't care for it, that's okay too. But you may find a new medium that you love. And this washes up with water too, which is very nice. Now I got this set of brushes at Home Depot today as well. I thought they would be nice. They're different stiffnesses of brush. And I could just kind of, I think I'll leave this, I'll just use it like a paintbrush, so I'll just leave this right in the lid, and it helps me put on a little finer texture. Kind of do that throughout the cat. I don't know how much of this will show later when I go to paint it, but hopefully it still will be there. Yeah, I kind of like that. I saw these little brushes and I thought, well, maybe I could use that. Now, being that it's a wall patch meant to be painted, I should not have to add gesso over this or anything, but this will be an experiment. We'll find out. You'll notice as you watch YouTube videos that artists are often experimenting. You just go ahead and try, and that's how they know what they like and what works. I really like these little stiff brushes. I use acrylic paints, and acrylic paints don't have a whole lot of texture to them, so I can get that type of texture by using various mediums to build up my surface. I think if this paints nicely, this might be kind of a new favorite of mine. Okay, so the basics are in there. I might just add a little bit of, this was a log, a sliced log. This is the ring here, and that she was sitting on, and she just climbed right up there. It was actually on a table. She just climbed up there like that was just her pedestal. She looked right at home. So it's sort of like I'm painting with texture at this point. I'm thinking about what I'm going to be putting down later as paint. And I'm going to let that sit now and dry. And I'll go wash out my special artist brush here. You'll find that a lot of the best art supplies are actually at places like Home Depot and Lowe's. Okay, now it has been probably, I would say it's been a couple of hours actually. It said it would be dry within 30 minutes, and it probably was. But now it's been a couple of hours, and there's a bit of flexibility. I can tell that it works fine with the canvas. Now I'm going to be doing a mixture of brushwork and palette knife. It has a nice texture on here already, so I could just use the brush, but I have the feeling that I'll be doing some palette knife work as well. I'm not thinking too much about background colors. I just kind of want to go for it here and see what I get. And I will list all of the colors that I use down in the description of the video. I'll probably put several coats down because I have enough of a enough texture here that I can do that. So I'm not putting too much water on my brush. It's like with usual acrylic painting, just dab the brush in the water and then dab it off on a cloth or a paper towel so you get out the excess moisture. You don't want too much water in acrylic paints. And I like titanium buff. I'm using some titanium buff here mixed with my other colors. So I take a bit of titanium buff and put that right on my brush, then go ahead and grab some other paint with it, whatever color I feel like at the moment, and start painting, and it automatically mixes up for you. You get kind of a nice effect. I can come back over it later and throw in other little colors. The background is sort of nondescript. I don't want it showing up too much because that's not the point of the painting. It's just there to set off the cat. And I can kind of play around with colors here because if I don't like something like that's very vivid green, I'll come back later and kind of take some of that out. So I'm just getting a feel right now for what I might like. Do I want a little yellow somewhere? Kind of want it to be a little bit colorful. Kind of pick up the playful side of her. The texture is still showing nicely. Now this is working pretty well here, painting over this texture. I'm pretty happy with that texture. The paint is sticking to it really well. When I'm all finished with it, there are various types of finishes I could put on. So I'm going to wait and think about that later. Throws in another little bright color of some sort. I don't want my brush too dry, but like I said, you don't want too much. If you get more than about 50% water in with acrylic paint, you lose the binding properties, the polymers that hold the paint together. So if you ever want to thin your paint, there are mediums that will do that for you. You add that to the paint. If you want to lighten the paint, you can add white or titanium buff or some other color. Now when I'm finished with the cat too, I may decide that some of this is too dark. So I always work on a painting, an area of a painting, and then I move on. And then I may later come back and decide that I don't like an area and that has to be changed. And that kind of just depends on what else happens in the painting. That's why I skip around a lot. I threw in a little gold here, assuming that that will tie in nicely with the cat. I don't want it to fight with the cat, so later on I may remove it, but I know I'll have a lot of gold and brown tones in the cat. If you get too much color down, then sometimes it's better to just let it dry, come back over it later. decide what you want to do with it, because otherwise you can end up just sort of smearing it around and not getting the effect you want. And all of my paintings, I shouldn't say all of them, but a lot of my paintings I turn into greeting cards. I'd like to start adding some messages to some of my cards. I'm thinking about that. And I list my Etsy page. And I also have a website that you can visit, and I'm on Instagram, so be sure to follow me on Instagram. That will keep you up to date on videos. I have a Facebook page too, but I think more people use Instagram. So right now I'm just having fun with color. It was actually a summer day. I live in Phoenix, and I had gone up with my husband and mother-in-law to visit my youngest daughter. And we were at a barbecue at her in-laws. And it was just a beautiful northwest day. We were sitting out in the backyard enjoying a Seattle evening. Being that this is a gallery wrap canvas, I need to remember to go around the edges. So you can see I haven't used a whole lot of paint at this point. Paint is not sinking in too terribly much. It's really kind of a nice effect. Usually when I do acrylic painting, I have to put down layers and layers, or I have to make sure that I add extra gesso, because store-bought pre-gessoed canvas boards and gallery wrap boards, they tend to not have enough gesso. After I finish this front piece, I'll go ahead and finish around the edges. You don't need to see that part, and then I'll let it sit overnight. It's getting to be early evening here now. It's 6 p.m. so I'm starting to lose some of my natural light. So I'll finish this off, do the edges, let it sit overnight, and then tomorrow I'll add any more that I need to the background if I see anything real obvious. Otherwise I'll let it be until after I start working on the cat. When I'm all finished, I'll probably do finishing details with the cat and anything that needs to be done with the background to tie in better with the cat. But so far I have to say I'm really happy with this Shur-Stik Permanent Patch 101 flexible patching and caulking compound. I'm quite happy with that. Okay, I've let it sit overnight, and I'm really happy with the way that it turned out. The permanent patch that I had gotten at Home Depot, wall patch that I used as my base for creating texture, really worked nicely with the paint. Paint almost kind of has a little bit of a muted effect, but it's bright in areas too, and it didn't sink in the way that it does on a canvas that has not had enough gesso on it. So I think I'm going to remember this for future, and it's a flexible finish. It's not like it's going to crack, even though canvas has a little flexibility to it. So a hard plaster put on canvas could maybe crack the way that plaster does on old walls in homes when the house shifts. And being that this is a plaster made for homes and exteriors and interiors of homes, they added some flexibility to it. So it's a patch that has caulking type consistency to it. So I think that I'm quite happy with that. So now today I'm going to start on the cat itself. I'm using some different colors. When I did my initial cat portrait of Annie, I used colors that I felt looked very natural. And being that this is a more of a playful type painting, I've purposely chosen colors that you wouldn't actually find in a cat. Annie doesn't have any actual red and blue fur and purple. But the brain will interpret colors, and shadows can actually have blues and purples and all sorts of colors. The shadow that a tree creates in the forest might actually be blue or gray. Your brain will tell you it's a light beige or a gray. But if you were to scan a photo and run it through a program that identifies the colors for you, you'd be amazed at how many different colors are in there. So I'm just going to go ahead and start laying down some different colors. I'm using my smaller brush here because I want this to work into these little areas. And Annie has some redness to her fur. So I'll have enough in the painting that she'll be recognizable as Annie. But again, I really want to do kind of break out of my usual mode of trying to keep everything exactly realistic. And as I have stated in other videos, if you try to stay with colors that you think are absolutely realistic, it actually won't end up looking realistic anyway. And this is one of my favorite colors here. It probably just looks black on the in the video, but it's actually called Payne's Gray, and it's a very, very dark blue, almost kind of like it's almost kind of like a little bit of a black, but it's nice for areas where you might want to have a little bit of shading, and it's not as harsh as black. I'm not really concerned too much about my light source here, but I'm putting the shadow on this side of this leg to kind of give some definition there. And then on this leg, the shadow is more on her body, behind the leg. I don't want this to look like it's just floating here in space, so I will later come back and darken a little bit of this area around here to make it still very abstract, but give this a little bit of a base here, as if it was actually sitting on a table, but I'll probably just make it a little bit darker across here, and the brain will interpret that as that it's sitting in the grass or on the ground or something. I use plates like this to hold my paint, sort of like a styrofoam type thing, and then you can also get plastic plates. Anything that the paint will not sink into works really well. And then this happens to fit into a large size Ziploc, and that way I can save my paint and it'll keep overnight. Just going to kind of throw in some blues here and there and see how I like that. Maybe up under the fur here. I can come back and darken this later. Titan Buff is one of my favorite colors. It's not as stark as white, and it's very nice beige. Another one of my favorite colors is warm gray. This is Titan Buff. I don't know if you can tell with the camera, but Titan Buff is slightly more yellow than warm gray. So depending on which tone you want, they're both very, very nice. I think because I have a lot of greens in the background, I think I'll use the Titan Buff here. Just sort of tone down that blue a little bit. She has a lot of white across here, but of course white is not ever just totally white. So I'm putting other colors in here with it. So this is just a lot of dabbing and seeing what happens. And the main thing is you just want to keep it so that the eye can, even though it's a fairly abstract painting, you want the eye to be able to tell what things are. I might come back and just take a little bit of that off. That's kind of bothering me because it makes it look like she has really long fur coming out that way, and she really doesn't. And I still want it to look like Annie. I am doing an actual cat who is a very beloved cat of our family. So I want it to look like her somewhat. I mean, I want it to be recognizable as her. So I'm playing around with colors and things, but I'm still putting in enough features that people in my family would know this is Annie. And the eyes are important because it really is true that the eyes are the window into the soul, and if eyes are not right, you're not going to really capture what you want. In the painting that I did of her before, I used the eyes to show the kindness of her soul. This is the painting that I did 1 year ago, and her eyes, I think, show the kindness of her. And this painting, I want her to still look kind. She was kind of mischievous looking, though, the way that she was sitting up there. Just walked on up onto the table and got up right up onto that piece of wood that they had on the table. And looked like she owned the place. So I want to capture that as well. Now I'll work on her face, and she has some distinct markings, but again, I'm trying to not be too concerned about being exactly like she really is. I just want to capture just some of the distinctive features that she has. For some of these areas, I'm running my brush through several areas. I might pick up a little alizarin crimson, and then maybe a little bit of the Titan buff, a little bit of this burnt sienna. So I have quite a bit on my brush at any given time. And then when I dab it, different colors come out, and I can decide then what I like and what I don't like and what I might want to change. I never just pick up one color. I'm always grabbing several at a time. I skip around a little too because I like to get different colors in different areas. So I'll work on one spot for a while and then I'll move elsewhere. Picking up just a little bit of this raw umber and then bringing in a little bit of white. It actually, when you hit the brush into the raw umber, as long as I'm not pushing too hard, it's just going to hit some of the longer bristles. And then when I go back and hit it barely into the white, I get this kind of mottled effect. It's quite nice. And your brain interprets that into fur for you. Another thing that's nice about this Titan buff, same as when you use the white, titanium white, it's a nice full-bodied paint. It's just a little bit of definition there to the ears. Nice little white feet. Fill in her little nose here. And for that I used a little bit of alizarin crimson and a little bit of the burnt sienna. And with that still on my brush, I'm adding a little bit more white. This kind of puts a little bit of shadow on this side of her face. I need to have some definition for her nose. Calico cats are fun to do because there's just all sorts of colors. It's a lot lighter on this side. Light catching her nose. And in here, in the photo, it looks like a black outline here, which of course I won't actually use black. I will use my payne gray. But first I will paint in her eye itself, which is kind of a real pretty golden green. And I have a color that works well for that. This is one of my favorite colors, Green Gold by Golden. Of course, you can make just about any color you want, but with just a few, if you just take the primary colors, you can make just about any color of the rainbow. But if you're like me and haven't yet mastered color mixing, then it can be really nice to have a good variety of colors. I'm going to use my little outlining brush for this just because this is a little bit of detail work here. For this part of her eye, I'm using payne gray and raw umber. I don't want to use actual black, that would be too harsh. I can go back and change that later if I feel like it doesn't quite capture her. That green gold that I just showed you is, it's not a real heavy body paint. It doesn't say that it's just a tint or anything, but it's not real heavy body, so I noticed that it does well when I mix it with something like Titan Buff. And this one comes pretty far over here to the side. Pretty much covers. This is sort of like it's not a lid, but it's the part of the eye. I guess it's the brow of the cat. This is where the little whiskers would come up. So this is a fold of skin that comes across the eyes here. So this is sort of the difficult part for me here, is trying to keep the whole look of not being too perfect and detailed, but like I said, I want it to look like Annie. I think that'll work. I think that gets her. I could always go back and add a little shine or something. But now there's the rest of the eye to do. I think I'm just going to use the payne gray here. Maybe I better throw in some Titan Buff there as well. Kind of calm that down a little bit. As you do things like this, don't be afraid, because if something doesn't look right, it is always fixable. Just a little bit of an outline here on her eye. About like that. That's about it. I don't think I want to do any more with that. I don't want this to be actual, real obvious. So I'm going to come back and sort of smudge that out a bit. My magical Titan Buff. This way there's just a little hint of a mouth there without it. Without it being too obvious, I need just a little bit more. Up here, I think the eye just sort of ends there, and I didn't want that. There we go. Maybe just a tiny hint like that. And I know Annie very well, and so for me, I definitely recognize her there. Wondering what would happen if I threw in a tiny bit of Titan Buff with white. There. Just a tiny dot of shine to her eye, and then I'll put a little bit down here. Now I'm going to take my favorite little frazzly brush and touch up a little bit of white fur under here, just so this is a little more obvious with the fur. And this is a heavy body white. Okay, I think that I will leave it at that. Okay, after looking at it for a moment or two, I realized I wasn't completely happy, because when I stood back and looked at it, my eyes went kind of right to her nose, and I realized that this could be toned down a little bit. I like it overall, but it just needs to be mixed up a bit. I don't want to lose what I have there, but just kind of make it not quite as obvious.